car fans, welcome to the Muscle Car Modeler. My name is Ralph. In this week's build here, I'm featuring, this is a 1964 Corvette Coupe here. A fairly rare car and a somewhat misunderstood car, and also kind of forgotten when it comes to the Stingrays, as everybody tends to talk about, all of them, but the 64 seems to be the forgotten one or the less desired, and it kind of shows up in its values too, but it really depends on the specific car. But it is a very special one for multiple reasons, but there are just some very significant things about the 64 in the options and what was actually available. Now, it's very similar to the 63, of course, 63 being the all-new redesign of the what's now referred to as the C2 Corvette, Generation 2, which I've never really understood why they call it a C2 when they consider the C1 and it's kind of by chassis design, and I can kind of understand that, but with the C1s being one body design for 53 through 55, and then a different body design 56 and 57, 58, 59, and 60 have a completely different body, and 61 and 62 have this rear half. So with all the different body configurations and everything, but grouping them together based on the chassis design just kind of stumbles me, because then I start to think, well, why isn't the C2 Corvette considered 62 all the way until 96 because of the independent rear suspension and the engine and tranny layout? But it is not. They consider the C2s this body style from 63 to 67. Which goes along more with my thinking, but when these things came out, they were a huge leap in Corvette, and this is really when Corvette really started to become something that it was unexpected to be. And that's basically because of the chassis design. When you look at the 53 all the way to 62s with the solid axle, rear suspension, and the steering and the way that car is set up, that's a 1949 Chevrolet chassis, and they all had that to varying degrees. So in the suspension technology department, there was nothing about the Corvette's chassis and frame. It was all in the body and the looks and the weight savings for the fiberglass body. And it was all about the engines and trannies and the performance that was added to them. But when they got to this one, well, in 63, it's kind of interesting to think they're all 327 engines, and they have virtually not changed from the 62 offering. So when you think about the 63s and the legendary split window and the hood vents and everything in that body style, it's the first, and it's definitely got the most unique of the original styling. I can appreciate that and understand that. But the 64s are kind of overlooked because they removed some of that. They cleaned up the hood, they took the Fox vents off of it, got rid of the split window. It lost its split window. When there was actually a kit to install this rear window in 63s, GM actually made a kit that you cut the cross, the center bar out, and added the updated rear window, because people were wanting to do that. So there are 63s running around that don't have the split window, and it's hard to put back in because there's a brace they cut out when they did that. So when it comes to the 63s. Now in the option category, one of the things the 63 is legendary for is the Z06 package. That's the big tanker, fuel injection, manual tranny, heavy duty suspension, and the splintered or heavy duty brakes that came in the Z06. Now that was a legendary package, and it was put together all in one package. Now that package did not appear for 64, but interestingly, the 63 was the first year for all the RPO codes and packages, where GM had come out with those to help you order your vehicles, the dealers and the customers to order the vehicles, and they really haven't veered away from that much. It just works really well. But 63 is when that system came out. So in 64, some of the changes, like I've already mentioned, the hood vents and some of the cosmetic changes, but the body really hadn't changed much. The vents are up here and changed from the 63s. The rear window, the hubcaps, and even some of the fine tuning rocker moldings changed a little bit. The hubcaps are the most obvious, and they came in both polished or gray centers as far as that goes, and a number of other options, but the engines stayed the same. It was all 327 engines, although horsepower bumped up just a tad in the top two. The 327 started at 250 horsepower. Then there was a 300 horsepower version. The hottest one was 365 horsepower, and that was in the non-fuel injection, and the fuel injection was 375 horsepower. Now, the 1963 fuel injection 327 was 360 horsepower in that Z06 equivalent. So for 64, it got a 15 horsepower jump. Now, that had to do with the updated heads, the 202 160 valves that they put in the heads, much more aggressive, hotter cam with higher lift. But with the higher lift, they lost just a tiny bit of compression, because the higher lift, there was a piston to valve clearance problem. So that's when they first put notches in the pistons. You think of a Chevy 350 and the high compression pistons, and you see the notches in there. That didn't exactly exist until the 64s. They cut those reliefs in there for the valves. So the compression dropped to 11 to 1. But anyway, so with the fuel injection 327, and the other interesting thing, the Z06 package, it technically wasn't dead. Matter of fact, two packages that were announced, well, one of them was announced in 63, the off-road exhaust system, whatever reason did not appear in 63. That became actually available in 64, and also the transistorized ignition became available in 64. So those two things can make the 64 Corvette a little bit faster and hotter than the 63 Z06. The big tank was an option. The firm suspension, the F40 suspension was an option. The J56 splintered heavy-duty drum brakes were an option. And all the components to make the Z06 package were available in 64. It just was not in one package. You can build a Z06 big tanker 64 Corvette. Matter of fact, the big tank option was still available in 65. Only available in coupe body style, though, not available in the Roadster. But that had to do with the fill tank and how high the tank actually went. Because of the physical dimensions of the tank, you couldn't put it in the Roadster body. So the suspension and the chassis were completely redesigned in this body. And with that redesign became the rear independent suspension, which saved 100 pounds and actually made this car quite an improved performance car. So, I mean, this kit kind of has it, but not really. But that's what this kit has. But all the suspension was completely improved. The frame was improved and reinforced with a bunch more cross members in it, and stiffened up compared to the X frame of the previous body style. So this thing was a much more stiff car and a much better handling car. So we'll get more into that, but let's take this outside and see it in the sunlight and see how this black paint shows out there, and we'll continue on. Well, here we are out in the sun here, showing this Raven Black 64 Corvette. Looking really good, but a little dusty. Somewhat of an older restoration, but not too old. But it's definitely showing it's a little bit of age here, and of course highlighting everything here out in the sun. But it is what it is. But being a vintage kit that I restored, and really happy with it, and she's looking really good. But definitely showing off the sun here in the black. So there she is. It's always fun to take these out in the sun and show them off, even though sometimes like this one looks good, but the sun is really highlighting the dust and any little scratch in the black that I've got in it that I didn't even realize was there anymore. Because you don't see it inside, but that's all part of the game. Could use a little bit better polishing, that's for sure. So maybe a little bit more cleanup, but yeah, I cleaned it up just to get it to this stage to show it off to you guys. But still looking good in the sun and everything, and we'll go back inside here real quick with this. But yeah, it's one more rotation here showing you this vintage annual 64 body from AMT kit here. But I really enjoyed doing this. All right, we'll head back inside and continue on. All right, guys. Now that we're back inside, I'll get more on to this one. I know I kind of went over quite a bit of the 64 and what makes it a bit more unique and different, but it's often forgotten because of the less flashy trim. The options really didn't change much compared to 63. It was the last of the four-wheel drum brakes, even though the 63 and 64 drum brakes were still 11-inch diameter drums, but they went to 2.75-inch wide front drums and 2-inch rear drums. So the stopping power of the drum brakes in 63 and 64 were a whole lot better compared to the 62. But also in 65, the big block 396 engine came out. The fuel injection was dropped. The big block hood, plus a lot of the other things for 65. The four-wheel disc brakes and some of that also is cherished, and of course the 66 getting the 427s in it, and the 67s as well with the Stinger hood and the stripe on it. So the big block ones are legendary, even though the small block cars were better handlers. And then the Grand Sports are definitely legends too, which I got to build one of those and get into that. But anyway, when it comes to this particular build, this one is an original AMT annual that I had picked up and restored. If I got any photos, I'll share them at the end of this. But I picked up a number of these, but I wanted to build all of the Stingrays and all of the coupes. The coupes didn't sell well. The Roadsters sold way better, the convertibles. And matter of fact, in 64, there were only 8,300 coupes produced. Roadsters were 14,000 something, almost 15,000. So almost 2 Roadsters to 1 coupe. Kind of hard to say because, to see nowadays, because this coupe body style was so legendary, but just kind of, undershadowed in the convertibles, Roadsters, they sold way better. But I find that quite interesting there. But I really enjoyed building this and restoring it. Had all the chrome redone, so there's the 1964 plate. There's some short calls with it, but the factory wheels and later AMT white wall tires that I added to it. But detailing out the chassis, it's just got molded in exhaust and then molded in rear suspension, which is kind of funny because you think about it. They developed this rear suspension, and it was in the Serve 1 concept car, but it had coilover shocks. But they didn't have enough room for the coilover shocks. So when they designed it, they compromised and went to the leaf spring setup, which ironically, kind of mirrors what the Ford Model T had in the rear suspension, as far as how the leaf spring setup was done. But all this rear suspension actually saved 100 pounds over what was there in 62. So beautiful car, and this one's got a manual tranny. And then the hood, and of course, AMT gave you the fuel-injected engine, so you got to put those in there. So I enjoyed doing that. And then the original annuals actually have the dash with the open hole there for the grab bar, which later kits didn't have. A lot of the reissues didn't have that. But just fully restored this, and this actually has a 64 interior, which the seats are a little bit different. The pattern is, but door panels. And then, of course, the dash, which is really hard to see. But and then the 64 wheel covers, which I mentioned. Here's my other 64 that I did. I've shown this one in the video. I did this one with the Argent, not polished wheel covers. And this was a 63 Roadster that I had modified into a 64 with a Model Haas hood. But I got a video on this, but just kind of want to show both of them side by side, even though one is an original annual and one is not. But I mocked it up as best as I can. And you can see the dash difference right there, the later dash that has no grab handle. But the rest of the dash pretty much looks the same. So anyway, we'll put that off to the side here. And I did this one for fun, just did the headlights up. They don't really rotate because their resin, it was such a tight fit that I just glued them in place. But really liked them and everything. And I got one more AMT annual Roadster that came my way later after I built this one, because I was watching eBay and picking them all up. So I got all of them now, but haven't restored all of them. But this one I did quite a while ago. It's one of the first ones I'd restored. Um, and I've shown some of the others on here as well. But I still got more to show because I did restore them. But anyway, that's I think that'll do it on this one. Is I got to save some of the statistics and facts for some of the other builds. But I can ramble on a little too long on some of that. But many of you seem to really like that kind of information. Even though this one, I kind of did a little bit of fun, just did it in tuxedo black, which was kind of a rare color, but it was available. So I did a black on black, just trying to do something a little bit different. You know, not have your typical red or silver Corvette, because that seems to be the most common colors. Well, we'll kind of cut it right there, and thank you guys for tuning in, subscribing, and all your comments and your shares and your likes and everything. I really do appreciate it. And check out our sponsors in the video description links below. And you guys, you have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you next time.